Yo, what's going on, fam? It's your boy Tahir Johnson, and we are back with another week of the Cannabis Diversity Report. Today, we've got our first guest live from Canada in the building, my homegirl, Antuanette Gomez. How you doing?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, I'm doing well.
Nice, nice. Well, it's definitely a pleasure to have you on today. Antoinette, for those of you guys listening, we met last year when she was hosting her expo, the Cannabis Built by Black Expo. But that's just one of the businesses she has. She's the founder of Pleasure Peaks. I don't want to take it away from her. Let her talk about all the amazing stuff she's doing in the game today. Antoinette, just tell the folks out there watching and listening a little bit about yourself. How'd you get in the cannabis industry and what do you do now?
Most definitely. Thank you so much for having me. I've been in the cannabis space now for almost 9 years now, which feels like a lifetime. And I got started as a holistic nutritionist. So I used to work at a chronic pain clinic here in Toronto, Canada. And it was just very eye-opening to see how effective cannabis can be for so many different people from so many different walks of lives, and how great it can be in giving people a quality of life, no matter like what type of barriers they're dealing with, whether that's mental or physical. So I find cannabis so fascinating, especially when it comes to its medical applications, but obviously recreational. Being like living in Toronto, Canada, it's amazing to be a part of that Canadian culture.
Yeah.
And see how far cannabis has come here. But yeah, I'm really excited for the future of cannabis. It's created such an interesting career for myself. I started a Cannabinoid Sexual Health Company called Pleasure Peaks, and I love it. And the reason why I started is because a lot of the patients at that chronic pain clinic were dealing with sexual health ailments or had ailments that would bleed into their sexual health. And I believe that everybody deserves to have an optimal sex life, regardless of wherever they're coming from. And that's where Pleasure Peak started. And now we have cannabis suppositories, CBD available in the US, and THC and CBD coming to Canada shortly. And yeah, it's been such an amazing ride and journey, to be honest. On top of that, I have the Green Rush program, which is a cannabis business accelerator that I love helping people navigate the cannabis industry. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of predatory manufacturers out there that are just so confusing for these smaller entrepreneurs. And I want to make sure that everybody is protected in this space, because it is a very highly regulated space, but it's one that has immense opportunities in and can really change the world as a whole. So it's great to be a part of it. So I love the Green Rush program, where I get to mentor many students on how to get involved in the industry legally. And Acapulco Gold, my cannabis jewelry company, that's been doing really well. Just, I love everything weed, obviously.
Yeah, right. Me too.
I think that cannabis can just do so much in so many different verticals, right? Within healthcare, within sustainable fossil fuels, within, culture, within, helping minorities get ahead in life. I think that there's so much to tap into. And yeah, that's why I'm so obsessed with it and still in this industry 9 years later.
Yeah. Like you said, 9 years is definitely a long time to be doing anything, but in such a young industry, you're like a whole OG at 9 years, right? And being that, it's very interesting and great that you started with this medical background, but then branched out into doing so many other things. And medical cannabis really is an important part of the industry. But of course, we face the stigmas of cannabis going through prohibition for so many years. What have you found have been some of the best ways to really introduce people and get people comfortable with medical cannabis, as a holistic type of medicine, and, like retraining them off of everything they've been taught forever?
That's such a great question, because it's so true. When I was working at that chronic pain clinic, majority of patients were not cannabis consumers. They were just interested in other alternatives because they've tried everything else and it hasn't worked. So I find that cannabis is usually found when it's like a person's last option. And even when being introduced to cannabis, there's still a huge disconnect there. There's still a lot of thinking that, you know, cannabis is mad reefer, it's the devil's lettuce. So what I loved about, you know, working with patients very early on is knowing that there's so many different alternatives for them and different medical applications. So it's like we don't have to smoke cannabis anymore to have relief. We now have cannabis topical creams that can give a localized area of relief, so you don't actually have to be intoxicated. There are different dosages, different strains, so it makes product selection much more easier for patients now more than ever before, and a lot more safer in regards to being intoxicated and the feeling of being high. That also, you know, obviously helps with a lot of pain types of ailments, but there are so many options for them, and I think that's the best part of easing people in, is knowing that there's options. Is that you don't have to smoke pot, we promise. You know, you might not even need cannabis, you might only need hemp or maybe CBD derived from hemp. That could be really beneficial for so many people. So knowing your options and educating patients is the most important thing that we need to do for sure in this industry.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, like you said, it's super interesting that you said like one of your paths in the Starting Pleasure Peaks was that you realized that a lot of those problems that people have lead to them having problems in the bedroom or sexual related problems. I'll never forget. So I started out as a bud tender, and back when I was at the dispensary, I remember there was some type of oil. It was something that we had. I don't remember the name of the product. I wish I did. But there was a patient that came in and he used it, and he said that it was like the first time he was ever able to get it in like years. And I didn't even know that that was like a thing, right? You know, so it's really interesting, like you said, all these applications of cannabis, right? Are there specific cannabinoids or what is it in cannabis that can help, you know, that helps people in those areas? And what are some of the ways that people utilize those?
Yeah, most definitely. Well, me being a geek when it comes to sexual health and cannabis is that I love cannabinoids and the way how it can really affect our genitals specifically. I think that, yes, cannabis has this vasodilator effect, right? So when we smoke pot, we find that our eyes get really red, right? Our eyes get red. You can kind of know that you and your friend are a little baked then, right? And that's because the blood vessels in your eyes are dilating. So if we can use that application of dilating the blood vessels locally, so on a genitals, like that has a vasodilator effect, very similar to the effect of Viagra, right? It dilates the blood flow so we can have a more erected penis. So what we're doing is that if used on a vulva specifically, with the anatomy of the vulva, you know, the vagina, and women are, you know, those who have one or identify, though the anatomy makes it cannabis a lot more easier to absorb. So I find that a little bit of cannabis goes a very long way here. And what we're finding is that it has the vasodilator properties, which means more increase of arousal, more sensitivity to touch, and you know, CBD, if it's in there, can also help mitigate pain as well. So it has this analgesic effect. So if you're a person that, you know, is a trauma survivor, just has pain during intercourse, or to have dyspareunia, or have endometriosis, or have, you know, so many different areas can cause you to have pain during intercourse. So that can help there as well. And that creates for a concoction of amazing orgasm, specifically for women, which I find is so fascinating, but also very pleasurable for men as well. So that's just, you know, cannabis lubricants as a whole. And then if you want to talk about suppositories, those are cannabinoid-based ovules that can be inserted vaginally or anally for a way longer, prolonged experience. And those can be very great recreationally, but also amazing medically as well. So you can only imagine the the types of experiences you would use them for. I've heard so many different experiences, from anal play to veterans using them for constipation, you know, to people who have endometriosis or fibroids. So it's really interesting, the array of use of suppositories and lubricants these days.
Yeah, and is that something that people can find in most dispensaries these days?
So, I feel that they're quite rare. I wish we would talk about sexual health a lot more, but Pleasure Peaks is available in the U.S. and coming to Canada. I'm so excited, but it is available in the U.S. right now online and coming to retailers. If you want them in their retailer, just reach out to them and request us. We do wholesale, but yeah, they are a rare product, and I find it's because we need to do the education on why these products are so amazing.
Education, and speaking of education, you do a lot of that, right? Like you said, you educate entrepreneurs on how to get in the cannabis industry. What is some of the best advice, right? Because there's so many people out here that really want to get involved. I think people read the headlines about, where the industry is going. But what are some of the first steps that you recommend people take if they really, want to get involved in cannabis?
I find that if you are an entrepreneur or you would like to be one and you want to be one specifically in this industry that is cannabis, is to, enter this industry, network, meet lots of people, and understand different facets of this space. Right? There's a big difference between cannabis media versus cannabis manufacturing. Right? So find spaces that make you really excited and that you're passionate about. Maybe it's in pharmaceuticals, maybe it's in drug policy, maybe it's in advocacy. There's so much. It's a whole industry within itself. That's what I love about cannabis, is that we really do need everyone in every vertical in this space. So I find that the opportunities are limitless, and if you really can bring your expertise over, you can really start that movement within that space, because so much hasn't been done here. So I find that it's such an open canvas. So I find that networking as much as possible, just so you can be inspired about all of the industry has to offer, and then see what that really makes you excited and worth doing, because I find that there's so much worth fighting for. I believe that cannabis and sexual health and fighting for patients is worth fighting for every day. And I love it. But I know that there's so many other fights and wars in this industry. I think that using cannabis and hemp as natural energies is something that's worth fighting for, and natural plastics, switching over from any traditional industry into more sustainable practices with cannabis, I think, is an amazing opportunity. And then since we talk about the lack of education in this space and product development, there's so much that hasn't been done yet that is needed on this space. And I can't say that enough. And I've heard so many different pitches. For example, this one guy who pitched me about a cannabis toothpick. And I was like, why are you pitching me a cannabis toothpick? This must be like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And he was selling these toothpicks. They're called Moon Picks, a great name. He was selling them to hospitals because using the toothpicks would make you salivate, and it's really helping the elderly salivate their pills down there. So I feel that there's so many different applications that cannabis has that just kind of really need those unique minds and creative minds to think outside the box, and really to destigmatize cannabis, right? It's that taboo that's really blocking us from thinking that the only thing we can do is brownies, right? And vape pens. There's so much more to this space. And I think we have to go back to that. And it's really exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're, a good example of that yourself, right? Most of the people I meet will say, oh, I want to own a dispensary, or I want to be a grower. But like literally, like I feel like you've carved out this whole lane. It doesn't really have anything to do with either of those, right? Like sexual health, focusing on doing a conference, a gold company, like thinking about the stuff that's not already done, and like finding a lane to do that is just so important. And I think a big part of that is networking, getting to meet people, getting to know who's out there, like different business ideas. It's like the more and more you hear this stuff, it just helps you think about what's missing. And I know, speaking of networking, you got to do some networking. Saw you pop up in DC. I saw on your IG. You were all in New York. You've been everywhere these past couple of weeks. Who are some of the dope people that you've been networking with recently?
It was such a nice time to visit the East Coast and travel to New York City and Washington, D.C. I traveled to New York City to sponsor the event with Happy Bloom, the CBD hemp company, which was amazing to be a part of. And Acapulco Gold sold out of so many pieces, specifically our rose joint holder here, where they were just such everybody loved them. So we sold out of that. But then after that, I was so happy that I was able to witness Happy Monkey's sponsorship with the Van Gogh exhibit. And it was so cool because it was beautiful to see cannabis culture, like real cannabis culture, not like the strategic corporatized cannabis culture, like raw cannabis culture from New York City, partnering with fine art. And I think that was such a beautiful thing to witness in my lifetime. I think, going back, being in this space for 9 years, I never thought that I would see legalization in my lifetime. It has grown so much so quickly, but there's still so much to do, obviously. But to see that that it's being normalized and adopted so quickly is really beautiful, because this plant has been, gone through a lot for a very long time. So that was amazing. The guys at Happy Monkey, Vlad and Ramon, are phenomenal people, and it was amazing to check out their lounge and their studio there and what's going on. And in Washington, it was the National Cannabis Festival, which is amazing to run into a ton of people like Al Harrington, Atha from the Tetragram app, the guys from BuzzFeed and the Chillstone. So it was amazing. I feel that this industry is so small, it's so big, but yet again, it's so small. We see the same people all the time. So it's like family. And I haven't seen anyone because of quarantine, right? So Canada had the longest quarantine in the world of 1.5 years, which is insane. So I definitely miss you guys so much. And it was so nice to see that the US and America is, open and ready for business still, and you guys are still thriving. And, the in-person events are still happening, which is lovely. It was so amazing to see after being cooped up for so long.
Yeah, it definitely was incredible. The vibes, I mean, both of them, man. That event in New York, just like you said, to never imagine I would be like where we could be at an art museum and be like out back taking dabs, right? And it was just so cool. Like everybody was there. I think that really helped to move the industry forward, right? And you being in Canada, I know you guys are a little bit ahead of us in legalization, having federally legalized a few years ago. But how have you seen, like, how has the industry and like the market changed there in Canada, like post legalization? What do you think is kind of like a preview of what we'll see here in the future?
Yeah, I find that after legalization, it's been really great to see how people have adopted it. Yes, the rollout in products has been very, very slow, very different compared to the US. The US has kind of left many opportunities for different products to be available in comparison to Canada, where we've been really strict on what's allowed and are very slow on our rolling out. So just to make sure that like everything is done properly, so we're not taking things back. So I have no idea what it's going to look like when the U.S. goes federal, because it's so different from state to state. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to roll out. But what I will say is that with Canada having these federal big giants, it's really hard not to have a monopoly, right? So there's so many acquisitions and mergers. I find it's very hard for the little guys to really stay afloat here, especially in the war of retail here in Canada. There's some dispensaries that just have 1 or 2 chains and some that have 80 chains across Canada. And so it's really hard to compete with those guys. And obviously retail is already expensive as it is, and these licenses don't really help. So I think that with the maturity of this industry, it's really hard for these smaller players. But what I will say is that in the US, you guys have many social equity programs, which is wonderful. And in Canada, we don't have a single one. So, we're working on that, which is great. But I think that you guys are ahead of the game, that maybe, there will be sustainability in those businesses going forward in comparison to scalability, hopefully. But that's kind of really the big comparison. Other than that, the wildness of Delta 8 and hemp CBD and its
Oh,
unregulated
crazy right now. Yeah.
in the US is absolutely insane. And I think it just opened up so many cans of worms. Um, and I think it's a really bad concoction. I'm kind of like watching a really slow car crash, because this Delta 8 is something that, yes, people, they're kind of still finding people and charging people just like cannabis with Delta 8, even though it's synthetic and it's coming from hemp now that they're finding. But at the same time, um, these are very new extraction methods that haven't really been tested as much as like isolated forms of like CBD, right? So like they're very different because these are not isolated, but they're intoxicating in the terms that they'll get you high. So how do these work in high dosages? Obviously differently. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to roll out. I'm very wary on it. And unfortunately, it goes back to, it's really sad to see that there's predatory manufacturers that just find anything that sells and they'll slap a logo on it and they'll put it on the market, right? So we'll see how that adopts. I find that it really takes away and, it legitimizes our industry. And I think it's such a pain to deal with, to be honest. But, we'll see how that goes. Only time will tell.
Yeah. I have to agree with you on that. Like you said, it really is interesting. Like you said, it just speaks to the ingenuity people have finding these different loopholes and different ways to try to be active in the market. One thing I do want to ask you about, and it's, you mentioned like here in the US, right? Like we are a little bit different having the social equity programs, but even with that, right, we haven't been so successful at being able to have minority participation in our industry here. Is it the same? Are you guys seeing the same thing in Canada? Like, what are the rates like? Are there, what does it look like with Black, minority, and women-owned businesses up there participating in the industry?
Yeah, it's much worse here in Canada because there is zero programs focusing on that. So right now, currently, the legal license market is made up of 1% of Black people, 1% of Indigenous, and 1% Latino, I believe. So we have a 3% minority group within Canada's Canadian industry, which is, I don't really think reflects at all the consumers or, the industry prior that existed. So I find that there's going to be a huge shift. And I have been actually noticing a huge shift in the legal market within the past year specifically, which has been great. There's been like a lot of transfer over from the legacy market because I think they're finally realizing that cannabis culture is something that you really can't, it's really hard to find. Like, yes, you can pay, a lot of data analysts to check out how cannabis is operating right now, but it's really hard to really grasp in terms of what the market really needs. And I think cannabis consumers get that. And I think we can very much feel that. I know they can in Canada, most definitely, when we see the same products across the bar, because we don't really care if it's the new brand or name. That makes no difference to cannabis consumers, really. We love good products and thoughtful products with consumers in mind, right? And I think that's very easy to see, and we see that so much in Canada where it's very much the same product in different packaging, and it doesn't make any difference, and they're wondering why it's not working. So with that, I'm finding a lot more legacy people within the legal market now, and it's nice to see that finally being a lot more adopted, because there are so much value within them, 1,000%.
Right, and I know that you're personally working on even trying to tackle that problem with the Cannabis Built by Black Expo. Could you talk a little bit about the Expo? What caused you to found it, and what were some of the highlights of having that for you this past year?
Yeah, I loved putting that together. So I started the Cannabis Built by Blacks Expo because of George Floyd's passing. I felt very paralyzed, obviously, during the moment. And it was just a huge moment for so many of us. With that being said, I felt that I was just getting a lot of not much support from the industry, but rather just like a lot of, performative allyship, let's say it. And I wanted to actually do something that would matter in this industry rather than performative allyship. So I found to found a virtual conference to highlight Black leaders in this industry, so we can inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs that look like us. And I think that's very important to have that type of recognition, because you can't be what you don't see or what you don't know. And it was amazing. We had over 70 speakers from over 4 continents, all who worked in cannabis, to speak about their experience, and we made it free. So it could be accessible globally. And, I hope to do it again this upcoming year. It was amazing to network with so many people across the world who get to work in cannabis and have this collective bank and mastermind. And it was an amazing experience. I'm really happy with the turnout. And I believe we're definitely going to be doing it again. And it happens in February for Black History Month every year now.
Nice, nice. And as a woman that has been that's been successful, like you said, doing this for 9 years now, what do you think is the biggest thing that you've learned, through this whole process that you would share with other people, that are interested in trying to follow in your footsteps or do something different in cannabis?
Yeah, if you, thank you. To follow my footsteps, I don't even know what that means, It's to do what you would love to do and what you're passionate about. And I think everybody can find their passion in cannabis. I truly do, especially if you love cannabis, you're halfway there, right? So I find that, if you ever want support, mentorship, you can always reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, email. You can check out the Green Rush program at AntuanetteGomez.com, or Pleasure Peaks or Acapulco Gold Co. Any of these things. But what I love to do is just to lead by example and to inspire people that they can have whatever it is that they want to have, and they can be creative in their careers, and they can have a really important mission behind that as well.
Yeah, and speaking of the internet, man, you have a super dope social media presence. I see you doing the unboxing videos and stuff all the time. I need to figure out how to tap into that, because I need people to send me some free stuff. But how did you get it? How did you get into that? How would you say you carve out a lane as like a how did you carve out that lane doing that?
Yeah, it's so funny. I think I started unboxing videos in quarantine because I was just home all the time. And my Instagram was so boring. I haven't posted anything because I would be at events constantly and conferences and galas, and I was just home. So I kind of was just showing off my bong collection, and people loved it. And I started just shooting more videos of my cannabis accessories, and people just started sending me cannabis stuff to unbox, which has been amazing because I love cannabis, right? So I find that if anybody wants to do the same, it's just being more heavily present on social media and building a followers of cannabis enthusiasts, which has been honestly amazing. In my recent travels to New York City and Washington, I've been able to connect with other cannabis influencers globally and connect as this little community, which has been fun, because the cannabis community has always been so welcoming, and creating content is always fun to do anyways.
Yeah, like I said, I'm here for the unboxing videos. I helped my daughter record a LOL surprise unboxing video yesterday, so we do a lot of that stuff in my house. So what are some of your favorite products that you got to try that that people may not know about, or even some really popular ones that you co-sign?
Yeah, my favorite one's definitely the Standing Glass. It's Wiz Khalifa's and Snoop Dogg's favorite bong right now. It's the anti-gravity bong, which is insane. I love it. It's my favorite thing.
Love that thing, man.
Oh, yeah. These ones, so cool.
Yeah. Yo, I love that thing. It's changed my life using this, man.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm obsessed with it. But I get so many goodies. I'm so thankful for all of these people who get to send me boxes. But what I love is that I've been known as like the bong girl now. So I get tons of bongs, which is so lovely because I fucking love bongs. I think my favorite has been from Grav Labs because they have great quality glass bongs for sure.
Okay. And so you are, like you said, you're a real cannabis enthusiast. So what's your favorite strains or what types do you like?
Currently, right now, Jean Guy is my favorite strain right now. Like, I love it. It always gives me like this very shroomy feel, and the terpenes are so delicious in this one. Obviously, Pink Kush comes as a close second. Pink Kush is also another Canadian genetic that I think is wild. I know you guys were like, "What's Pink Kush? Is it actually pink?" In the States, you're like,
I
"What?"
thought when you said it.
Just so funny. But it's actually a really popular strain here in Canada that I love so much, and it's just quads all the time. It's just so delicious. So those are my go-to. Every time I'm in the States, I'm always confused. Well, you know, we have gelato obviously everywhere, biscotti and stuff like that. But yeah, I love my Canadian genetics because BC Bud, you know, has some great stuff for sure.
So is the weed better here in the States or in Canada? Which one? Or is it about the same?
I'm obviously biased because I'm Canadian, but I would say we have way better genetics because I just love our genetics. They're so good here. They're delicious. Look at my face. I'm like so excited. It makes me so excited. When I was in the States last week, I was smoking great weed. I was not impressed that I had to spend $30 for a cookies pre-roll. I was quite upset about that. Because like the most expensive pre-roll you'll find here is like $12, right? It's insane if you're paying like anything more than that. But yeah, like I was smoking flower and I was just not really impressed. The only thing I was impressed by Gary Payton's cookies. All of the other cookies I wasn't very impressed, which was such a letdown because everybody's obsessed with them. But then, you know, you guys have a lot more moon rocks down there in the States than we do here, which is great. But in terms of like tastiness and genetics, no. Flour, yes, abundant. So much flour, so much moon rocks, so many different applications, so many different, you know, different types of cereals, for example. You guys have cannabis cereals everywhere. So funny. Like, why? But okay, interesting, weird flex. But Canada, we may have less products, but our flour is artisanal. Like our genetics are fire, absolute fire. So I will say that, if anything.
No, but that's so crazy because you must really you really are a connoisseur. I'll tell you, it's interesting you said Gary Payton. My folks at Cookies have told me that Gary Payton is like their best selling strain. So it's like of all the ones that they have, right, that they're known for, that really is the one. And you picked it right out first time over here.
Yeah, exactly. I tried them all. You know, unfortunately let down a lot, except for that one.
Yeah. And so, you know, now that you have, now that you've been doing this for a while, what are some of the things what's next for you? What are some of your other goals to conquer in the industry?
What are some next goals to conquer in this industry? You know, I feel like I've done so much already. I feel like I just need to relax a little bit. I really just want to continue to grow Pleasure Peaks. It's still my baby and company that I've been doing the longest now for like 6 years. And I just want to continue to bring that globally, you know, helping patients, helping people have the best sex lives that they can, and sharing this education globally. I think it's just so important and so fulfilling. So I absolutely love that. So we're, you know, North America is almost done. US and Canada, next stop, South America and Europe for us, and just continuing to grow our brand. That's really like the highlight of it all. The Acapulco Gold, the cannabis jewelry is just what gets me to, you know, go to the conferences, have booths with you guys, and see the cannabis community that I love. And the Green Rush program is so I can make myself available and to continue to support anyone that needs support in this industry, because I do want to make it a lot more accessible. I get that it's a really hard industry to tap into, and I just want to change that.
No, well, I definitely appreciate all the work that you've been doing. And thank you for tapping in with me all the way from Toronto. Where can people find, all your different brands online or social media if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, you can go to AntuanetteGomez.com or PleasurePeaks.com or AcapulcoGold.com. So any one of those websites will do. But most definitely, Antoinette Gomez is my personal, if you ever want to reach me there. And Pleasure Peaks is our sexual health company as well, which we also have a podcast on. So I have two podcasts. I have the podcast at Pleasure Peaks, which is a Pleasure Talks podcast. And we get to highlight people and sharing their own stories on cannabis and sexual health, which is actually quite fascinating. We have this one episode where this one woman cures her 13-pound fibroid with Rick Simpson oil, of all things. So it's really fascinating. And then the Green Rush program, we have the Green Rush podcast, of course, the Green Rush podcast, where we highlight other mentors in the Green Rush program that can help you start your own business in the industry if that's something that you're choosing to do. So check those out if you're interested. And yeah, AntoinetteGomez.com, that'd be the best.
Amazing. Well, Antoinette, thank you so much for stopping by. One last question. This one has nothing to do with cannabis, but I got you because you're from Toronto. Hey, that Donda finally just dropped after weeks. Who you got, Kanye or Drake? And I probably know what the answer is going to be.
Come on, Drake, of course. Drake over everything, all day from the 666. Come on. Drake is so much better. Kanye is going through whatever Kanye is going through, but he's always going through it. Drake is just, a lover boy. You can't not hate him. His music is always going to give you vibes. I am so excited for his album dropping soon. This is going to be such a great winter.
Yeah, and I know he was supposed to do the cannabis brand. I guess partnered with Canopy or somebody. Did it ever come out? And was the bug good if it did?
So his deal with Canopy ended up falling through, which I think is great because I don't think Canopy has been doing a great job with most of their bands anyways. So I feel like Drake now has an opportunity to partner with a smaller licensed producer who can do artisanal or craft cannabis, which I think would be better for his brand anyway. Remember, Canopy is the one that burned $1 million worth of their crop and owned Snoop Dogg's Leafs by Snoop. So, and they just lost Seth Rogen's house plant. So I don't think they're the best partners for them. So I'm glad that Drake can get an even better partnership, hopefully, coming out of this. I know he wants to get involved. Things are just really slow in Canada in terms of bringing products to market. So that's kind of just expected, if anything.
Hey, I feel like he should have had a Pleasure Peaks, like something to drop with Certified Lover Boy. That goes right with the vibe.
I love that. That'd be so awesome to partner with Drake one day. Hey, I'm open to it. I'm sure something will eventually happen. What we want to do at Pleasure Peaks is we want to have a tour with like different sex icons like Amber Rose eventually talking about sex and cannabis. So I'm really excited for those types of products that we get to do at Pleasure Peaks. So I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Super dope. Well, Antoinette, again, I appreciate you stopping by, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch and following everything you're doing up here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And, until next time, keep in touch, of course.
Yep. Peace out. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.